Welcome to the Narrator Roundtable. I'm Kirt Graves. Joining me today, we have Lindsey Dorcus. Hello, Lindsey.
Hello, Kirt.
So glad to be chatting with you again today. And we also have André Santana. Hello.
Hey, hey.
Good to see you again. I started working an office job at a healthcare technology company in my mid-20s, and I experienced something new to me. A monthly paycheck. It takes some getting used to, but you'll love it, I promise, my new boss assured me. Listener, I did not love it. Then I worked for a school district where I got paid bi-weekly, again, like a normal person, but only if I submitted my virtual time card by a certain time every week to my supervisor so he could approve it and send it to payroll. If you missed a pay period, like if you were on vacation, or if you forgot to submit your time card early before said supervisor went on vacation, if HR had any issue with the hours you submitted, you would wait 2 more weeks for those hours worked to be turned into cash. But then I became an audiobook narrator, and I have been well compensated on a timely, consistent basis ever since, never again worried about the balance of my bank account or when bills were coming due. Not. Not. Do we all remember not? Is that just from my, youth?
No, me too.
Not. No matter the job, keeping track of income and expenses can be a hassle, and narrating is no different. So today, we're talking about the pitfalls and pro tips to getting paid with our very special guest, Kimberly Wetherell.
Hey, everybody.
Welcome, welcome. Kimberly is a kaleidoscopic storyteller with a multifaceted history. Florida grown and Brooklyn cured, her journey to engage and inspire, be it as an actor, director, writer, or producer, has taken her around the world, working in a variety of mediums: opera, theater, film, and literature, giving voice to smart, strong, not-so-silent types. We are certainly happy to welcome a fellow not-so-silent type to the roundtable. Welcome to the podcast, Kimberly.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. Definitely a long-time listener, first-time caller situation here.
Yay!
Love what y'all are doing, and I'm so excited to be a part of it. Thanks for having me.
We love to have our ego stroked like that. Thank you so much. All right, guys, today we're talking about getting paid. Let's start at the very beginning, which is... you know how they say the good, the bad, and the ugly? We're skipping the good because there's not much of it. What's the bad and the ugly? What makes this such a struggle for you guys? I'll let you guys start. I have my list that I'll go in on if you don't touch on something. Where do the struggles exist?
For me, it really starts at the very beginning. Every day I wake up, I look at the ceiling and I say, why do we get paid by finished hour and not by word? Why do we have to wait until a project is done and we know the exact length it'll be to estimate how much we're going to be paid, as opposed to so much other voiceover, which would be predictable from the get-go when you have the recordable manuscript? Just pay us by word.
Agree 1,000%. So many other forms of voiceover. You're by this, the studio hour or the session fee, or the job is a set rate, or with e-learning and corporate narration, it's paid by the word. There are so many other ways to be paid. It's tough. It's hard to estimate. It's hard to budget because who knows? Maybe some, books are longer and they require more pathos and pacing and empathy. And some books are bright and quick and sharp. And so 80,000 words, could be 7 finished hours or it could be 10 finished hours. And it just depends on the tone. Yeah. And that doesn't always feel fair.
At all. Some books are duet and have kind of an unclear kind of pacing, or even you're in the multicast and you've got your handful of lines, right? Like, thank God for the 1 hour minimum. But
when you're union,
real. It seems like a difficult place to start the payment conversation, because so many of my concerns about the middle of the process, the fact that, and I say this all like grateful for the union's impact on payment anyways. I am grateful that money arrives in my account and that I can pay my rent. But you know, the time between you recording and the pickups being ready and the final project being done are unrestricted in so many contexts and can balloon and spiral and become a whole ball of problems. And I just want to buy groceries.
Yes. So that, I mean, you're right. Like, that is the genesis of so many issues, is that waiting for the finished hour to find out how much we're even eligible to be paid for. And then the uncertainty of when that finished out, like, when is finished. We don't get to decide when finished is finished, even though 95% of the work that we have to do is done when we finish recording the book, and then we sit around and wait for pickups. But that's not when the countdown starts. The countdown doesn't start for perhaps weeks, sometimes months. And then there's a countdown of, 30-day terms, 45-day terms. So it's great that we have terms, that has been negotiated and that so many people follow them. And it's great that some production houses and publishers even work to exceed those terms. But there is still, it's the uncertainty of when will this project be done? And when do I even start asking for money? And then different publishers and production houses have different rules. So do I just wait for you to tell me when it's done and you'll send me money automatically? Do I have to submit an invoice? Do I have to be a part of your invoicing system the first time we work together? And will you remember to tell me that before the project has been done for 2 months?
Something that is also particularly unique to audiobooks. We'll talk about union contracts because, of course, non-union contracts can be the Wild West, and indie projects can be their own thing. But speaking specifically for union work, if you're looking, I forget even what the count is now, something in excess of 90 different agreements with 90 or more, perhaps. I think the last time I looked, it was 65. So I know it's gone way beyond that at this point. But let's use 90 for a round number. There are 90 different agreements, which means different terms, different payment schedules. Somebody's net 30, somebody's net 35, somebody's net 45. Is it 45 from date of final upload? Is it from when pickups are done? Is it when total running time is done? So we've got 90 of those for us as narrators to navigate. There's no central contract or agreement. So like in film, for example, you have tiers and it's based on the budget. So, you've got micro budgets, you've got low, you've got ultra low, you've got, between $1 million and $5 million is one budget, in excess of $5 million. So scale is based on the budget of the production. But we don't have a single central agreement that we can refer to. So we have to know or rely on our union reps to tell us 90 different ways that somebody might have an agreement with the union to pay us. Yet we are also independent contractors, which if I was working on an indie contract, in my indie agreement with an indie author, I require 50% when we agree to, when I submit the first 15-minute sample. Once that is approved, I require a 50% down payment on the estimated final running time, and then I will begin recording in earnest. But we don't do that, even though we're independent contractors. So there's so much to keep track of. It's very, very difficult to plan.
Yeah. Well, and I get that like these publishers and these other companies are larger and do have more checks and balances built into like their payment systems and stuff that slow things down more than like a one-to-one sort of situation. But still, and and I know that like a net 30 and a net 45 is like better than nothing, and I am so grateful for that. But it also blows my mind because, like you said, I hire when I work on indie books, I hire an editor and proofer. Sometimes when I work on like dual indie books, I'm often the producer on that, and I'm responsible for paying the other narrator. And let me tell you, when I get like my invoice back from my editor, they're getting paid within 24 hours. They're getting their money immediately. When I am working with a dual narration partner, the second I get money from that indie author, they're also getting paid within 24 hours. And it's just a matter of like, as soon as the money fully hits my account, the next time I have a moment to sit down at my computer and make that transfer, it's happening. So like, for me, it happens immediately. And the difference between, and like, I'm a small business, and that's how I run my business. So like, the difference between, okay, I get that like maybe for a larger company, a 24-hour turnaround from like invoice received to payment might not be possible because of like real logistical issues. But the gap between like how I can turn around a payment in 24 hours and they need 30, 35, 45 days, and that clock doesn't even start until until like after the pickups are completed. And sometimes even after those pickups have been incorporated on their end. And I also understand not wanting to pay us until we've done 100% of our work, right? Like I understand waiting until they have those pickups in hand and they've confirmed that they're correct. But like the second that happens, it's just maddening that they can't be like, okay, and here's your money. Like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I've had month-long timelines from pickup to end of project to the invoice going out to then having to wait the 30 to 45 days after the invoice has gone out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there's also just the frustration of, because there are different timelines, like Lindsey and I know do probably more indie work than you guys do, but typically indie authors will pay you pretty quickly. Not that they're not human and things may go wrong and there may be delays, but most of the time, because of the way ACX and other platforms work, they're not allowed to release the book until we confirm that we've gotten paid. So as soon as it's done and it's approved, they're usually like, how fast can I send you the money? Which is awesome. But you have to balance that with the other work. So if you're working for production houses or publishers and you're not getting payment for 30 to 60 days, depending on their schedule, trying to figure out when payments are going to hit your actual bank account so that you can pay for things, you have to be careful to not accidentally schedule too much publisher or production house work so that it doesn't coincide with indie work in such a way that you have a ton of money in August and no money in September. So that's another part of just the frustration of getting paid, because it's like you got to look at what typically is the timeline for payment for this person who I'm agreeing to work for, and then now I have to look at what's happening before it and what's happening after it, and when will I actually have money.
Well, and I am so impressed by people who are able to have a separate business account and then they like pay themselves a salary into their personal account from that business account, which like I will totally agree with people where like that seems like the smartest, best way to do it. I'm like, I'm going to do that someday. I'm going to transition to that. I've never though had a time when it's not like the second that money hits my bank account, I need it now. Like for bills, for whatever, like I'm usually waiting long enough for it between like the work finishing and getting the money where I'm never like, oh, let it like hang out in my business account and then I'll slowly bring it over. No, I do not have time for that. I need it now. So like,
well, and I actually implemented that plan this year. I was like, I am going to try this. So I figured out what the amazing Tori Dunlap calls it your ramen budget. What is your ramen budget for the month? Rent, utilities, food, absolute dog food, like your barest necessities. So what's your ramen budget for the month? And I came to that number and I said, okay, I'm going to break it into 2 payments a month. And on the second and on the fourth Friday of each month, I get X amount of dollars from my business account and I put it into my personal account. And I mean, it's become this like incredible financial chain because the money comes into the business account. I immediately pull out my taxes, put it into my high yield savings account. Then twice a month, I drag money over. But here's the catch. Not every 2 weeks am I able to pay myself what my biweekly payment should be. Sometimes I don't have enough money in the business account. So I'm like, oh, maybe I only get $1,000, this 2 weeks or whatever it is. And the way that I cover that is I also have two credit cards, one for personal and one for business. And absolutely everything that can possibly go on a credit card goes on a credit card. So those payments, I mean, everything is delayed. Nothing gets an instant payment for those exact reasons.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, I got to buy groceries. And if I dip my, personal checking account below this amount, they're going to take out $15 just for a below the balance fee. And, boo banking for doing that for us. But okay, if I put it on my credit card, at least I know that eventually it'll come over and I won't be overdraft or get dinged.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly convoluted. And would that I had enough money that you could have that 6 months or 12 months in the bank to make life easier. But in this economy?
Exactly. I was going to say, I've tried to do this exact thing. And when things are going well, I can do it. But as I was just sharing with Kimberly before we started recording, like I've had a slew of authors canceling projects on me lately. So today I had to go into that other account and be like, well, it's just time to give myself some money because things are due. Yeah. And so I don't have the luxury now of sticking to that schedule that I tried to. And probably like this year especially was probably successful, like maybe 3 or 4 months out of the entire year was I successfully able to follow my own schedule for paying myself. Because of the conditions that we are currently living in.
Well, and also, I mean, that's the problem that I've had every time I've tried to use that like ramen month method of budgeting, which like on the surface, it makes a lot of sense. But then I actually look at like life and like I go back and go, well, how did that work? I'm like, oh, it's so rare that I get to have a ramen month where it's like, oh, I just like paid for groceries. I paid my heating bill. I paid my rent. And that was it. And I did it. And not because I'm out here like going on shopping sprees, but because like something essential broke and needed to be replaced, because a project got pushed and I didn't make as much that month because
your crown fell out.
Right. Because I got sick, because I went to the dentist and all of a sudden I had to get a cavity filled that I wasn't expecting. Like life just keeps on lifing. And so it's like, I'm not, it's like, well, when will I get a month where it's like, I just paid my bills and that was it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I know there's like I'm sure there's a long, complicated history that precedes us and isn't about audiobooks, about contractors and net 30, 90, whatever. I get it. I know that it's not about this is not like a choice the specific companies we work for have like foisted onto us. I get it. But also someone recently said to me, like, I could not conceptualize. I just got my hair cut this week. I go to the barber, sit down, get cut, get out of the chair. I'm like, amazing. So in 30 days, I'm going to send you money for this haircut. And I'm going to wait till the last minute to send you money for this haircut.
And you might actually have to like bug me about it. Like you might actually have to email me and be like, hey, it's getting up on that deadline. Are you going to pay me or what?
Yes.
Or that haircut is part of like a larger overall styling project. And so I'm going to start the 30-day countdown once I've also had my beard trimmed and somebody has provided me with a new shirt and a new pair of shoes. And like once all that's done, I'll start the countdown and I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Like that is the part of it that's the wildest to me, is how much of our timeline for getting paid depends on other people finishing their work.
Yeah.
Imagine building a house and not having to pay the people who poured the foundation until the final picture from the interior decorator is hung on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a situation, and I'm glad the like production company was so like thoughtful about it. But I did a tiny part in a book. Another narrator had the majority of it. I did it, I think, sometime in the late fall. And then come January, I was like, oh, I did not get that payment. I haven't even got the pickups from this project. The other narrator had like an extensive delay. The project shifted, etc. But I had to reach out and check in. And at that point, they were grateful. Grateful. They were really considerate, and they paid me, as you know, did the pickups within a couple of days. They paid me right away, even though the other person hadn't finished because it had been so long. But it's a process of initiations that can span for a while, and the contracts allow them to span for a while. And ultimately, I get it. We see the vision. We all know how each of the steps work, how many different vendors are involved, how expensive some of the components can be. And I want ramen. I gotta eat.
And at the same time, there are companies that do it right. There are companies, I mean, that, will pay you 50% of the estimated, from, I think it's final delivery. I think it used to be when you signed the contract, but I think since it's once you've said, okay, all files are uploaded, that starts the clock for the first half of the payment, which is closer. That's better. And then you get the final half once the final running time is done. That's great. I also think that's the only company that I work for, certainly, that does that.
There's a couple other examples. There's one other that when you sign the contract, they'll send the first few hours payment. So 3 to 5, depending on how long the project is. And then they've got kind of the normal, like after pickups, after everything is done, initiate the last part. And then there's one other company that like actually has a very specific history with their onboarding process that's just shifted. But you record 1 week, you send in a timesheet for the finished hours that you record, and you get that direct deposit by the next Friday. Yeah.
Cool.
But
that's
not
awesome.
common. Not common, right?
I mean, the fact that we can probably name them and maybe they'll will they exceed a hand? Do they get the second hand? That out of 90 some signatories? That's
and I've got one company
tough.
Other than that like the second I finish recording, they're in New York. When I finish recording, engineer reminds me, send in your invoice, and I send it, and they honor that 30-day turnaround. I think that's.
But it's interesting because here, I don't know how large the company is you're talking about that has like from invoice submission to payment about a week, you said, right? I don't know how large they are. And again, like, I understand that like larger, more cumbersome, but it also tells me like it can be done. It can't, like, if you can do it, what is stopping other people except from like wanting to wait as long as possible to pay us? Because I think of this also with like casting stuff where it's like some people can cast books 6 months in advance. So we know that's possible. And again, this is no shade to like the people actually doing the casting, doing the work on the ground, because a lot of those people are like very overworked and probably underpaid and like getting stuff into them at the last minute and then turning it around as fast as they can. So like, and I imagine same with like people in that payment chain. I imagine there's a lot of people who are like getting the information they need to process on their end and turning it around as fast as they can before it goes to like another step and another step.
Yeah.
So this is not me shading the people doing the actual work, but like the people who are creating these systems, it's like, it's possible for it to be better.
Yeah. Well, and I even understand to a certain degree the desire from a capitalistic standpoint of wanting the gap between paying your talent and the book being in front of an audience, like in front of consumers, like as close as possible. You would like to not have paid your narrator and the book doesn't go on sale for 6 months. I get that.
I would disagree with that because everybody who works for that company is paid twice a month. You know, when the job is done, the bill is due. You know, companies, they have, what us as indie contractors would hope to have is they have a well to draw from.
Yeah.
Our payment is not contingent on sales. If it was a royalty situation, I would get wanting to have that close by.
Well, I think it's different than for publishers and production houses.
Yeah.
Because production houses where they're
them.
buying audio rights and they don't make any money on the project until it's released. That I guess is what I'm thinking of when that gap between paying us and the book coming out. Like, because they don't wait to put the book out. These are backlist titles. As soon as it's done, they're processing it to get it out the door. Yeah. And so that's where, like, I had a similar situation to André, where, like, I had a co-narrator who just, like, life got to them. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden it was 2 months later and I hadn't gotten pickups back. And it was a 4-book series and I was 3 books in and the other narrator still hadn't recorded the first one. And nothing was happening, where I finally had to reach out and be like, hello, I understand that the other narrator's going through it, but I'm going through it now because I've done 3 books for which there's no getting paid on the horizon. And I was supposed to get paid for these projects by our own agreement a couple of months ago, So, like, can I get paid even though he's not done? And to their credit, once I pointed it out, they did whatever they had to do in their system to get me paid. But it was literally like their system that all happens automatically once certain things get done. And because the other person hadn't submitted their things yet, none of my things were moving forward.
Well, and, back to Lindsey's point, it just goes to show there is so much more to doing this job than just reading a book. We are, all of us, small businesses. We are all solopreneurs. And there's just so much. I mean, if you're a spreadsheets and a systems person, like, you're in heaven or hell, I guess. But, like, you have to have these systems in place because your landlord does not care that your co-narrator is sick. You got to pay the rent.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just tell them you'll get it to them in net 30.
Net 30.
And I also wonder, this is the cynical part of me talking, and some finance expert might tell me, like, that's actually negligible. But I wonder, especially at these larger scales, how much of that holding it for 30 days is about, like, the interest or the accumulation of wealth that might happen on that money. Because, like, if somebody paid you, Kimberly, $1,000, and then instead of turning around and paying the person that you're supposed to pay, you just stick it in your high yield savings account for a month. And now you have $5 that you didn't have before. And then you pay them. But, like, you just made $5 for nothing. That was great. Like, and so I imagine that at scale is maybe, I'm curious. I don't know for sure, but I'm curious how much that is part of their, like, business financial strategy. And then that is now affecting, like, all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure it depends at all levels. Again, like we were saying, like, these are all such different types of companies, ranging from, like, one person who, like, is also a narrator, half the time, to multi-million-dollar corporations.
So I'm curious, now that we've kvetched for a little while, how does all of this affect you guys? How does it affect us? Is, like, we've touched on some of them, but, like, how does it affect your day-to-day life? How does it affect how you approach your work? And how do you cope with the uncertainty of this payment structure?
As I had said before, I personally, I have so many different systems in place to make sure that I am just aware as when that net 30 comes due. And if that money's not in my bank on day 31, there is an email to whoever I need to email to be, tap, tap, tap. Hey, so just checking in, making sure nothing slipped through the cracks. And one of those things that I do personally is the minute I get my total running time from any company, whether the invoice is being submitted to a paymaster for me, or if I have to submit that invoice myself, I use Wave is my invoicing system of choice. You know, folks have QuickBooks or whatever. And I create an invoice for every single job and I make it for 30 days, whether, you know, every company, 35, 40, whatever, I make it for net 30. So even if that invoice isn't going out, Wave is wonderful because I will get a reminder, hey, this is due in 3 days and you haven't marked it as received.
Mm-hmm.
So I use some systems to help me remember to check in. You know, I'm always a month ahead using the credit card system because sometimes the money just hasn't come in. So those are a couple of ways that I have now structured my life. So I'm not quite so paycheck to paycheck as I was this time last year. I always make sure I take my taxes out first. So, you know, my quarterly taxes are always kept up with. I mean, it's so much work.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish there was a way around it, but there really isn't.
Yeah. And even the process you described that you do, like paying yourself, you know, people incorporate with an accountant and like formalize that process. That's a high bar. That's a high income bar to meet in order to be able to do that. That audiobook narration isn't necessarily the career where people are always going to meet that income bar.
Mm-hmm. And it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
Because it matters where you live. It matters if you're married. It matters if you own property. It matters, you know, like there's so many things that affect your tax bracket and your, and you need to hire a professional to tell you, like, is it time for me to do this? Or is it better to stay an independent contractor?
Well, and I should say, I don't use a payroll company. I just do a manual transfer. I don't even have it automated because again, like I said, when I get a little reminder on my phone that like, boop, today's payday, I have to make sure I actually can give myself my full payday into my personal account. Sometimes if 1 week I was at 50%, the next week I better make sure it's at 125%. Because again, rent, it's for me personally, it's just, I'm always thinking about money and I'm always thinking ahead, because I will openly admit the first 4 years I did this, I was always behind. Yeah. And it took me a really long time to build these systems and get comfortable enough and be like, you know what, this month you don't get food delivery. You just don't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't get, you're going vegetarian this month or whatever. And you just have to be really, really hard on yourself because you know that, you know, as far as budgeting, I assume that all payments will be made 90 days in advance. So I try to make sure that I'm working 3 months ahead as far as like booking. I mean, as much as I can, because we don't always have control over what we get booked on.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of hustles to always be thinking about. But like I'm already, and I'm a little bit late on it, but like I'm right now budgeting for like January. And making sure that I have enough income that will hit in January and February. You just have to think that far ahead. And it took me a really long time to figure that out.
I'm with you on having the reminders, although mine are like, I have little tiles on a whiteboard that I move from like prep to recording to pickups to done. And sometimes I have like...
Mine's right over there.
Yeah. Sometimes I have like 6 or 7 little tiles in that done column that I'm just waiting to get paid on. I'm like, that's going to be so much money when it comes. But it's nice to like, but then I look at it every day and I can be like, okay, who hasn't paid me? When did I turn in? And I have little dates on the tiles about like when I turned stuff in. So I know to ask. And like, I think that's also part of it is like the self-reminder and then just having the courage and the like, you know, business savvy and just not to be afraid to reach out to these people. Cause sometimes I feel nervous about being like, hey, can I get paid please? But also like, I've done the work and they agreed to pay me for it. So I mean, you say you wait until 30. Sometimes I'm like, that 28 days out, I'm like, hey, so we're real close to 30. How's it going over there?
Yeah. And I do love sending that email because it's always on its way as soon as you send it right in that window.
Right.
Well, and some of them, they pay at a certain time. So it's like, well, I didn't get my notification on, I'll say, I didn't get my Tuesday notification that payment's coming. So I know it's not coming on Friday, and that'll be 33 days. So now I'm emailing on day 28 because I know the way you pay things means I'm not getting paid in time.
Yeah.
Because you haven't notified me.
Yes. No, sorry. And I just also wanted to tack on before I toss it over to André. Also, not being afraid to check in when it's been a while for pickups. I just did that recently where like I'm in a similar situation to what Kirt was in, where like my lovely co-narrator, there was a snag in the schedule, or sometimes they're just naturally scheduled way after you. And I had to write in and be like, hey friends, I turned these files in 2 months ago and I haven't gotten pickups yet. Can I get those? And they were like, oh yeah, cool. We haven't gotten your dual partners, but we can proof yours and get them. And we'll like look into payment and get that going. Like, but without asking that, I might have had to wait another month, 2 months, whatever. I might have had to wait till he finished his files whenever. Yeah. So I think it's worth, like, if you notice it's been a minute, either for payment or pickups, giving a little tap on the shoulder is totally cool.
I've had and seen other narrators have an increasingly complicated situation where maybe it's a backlist or for whatever reason, it's scheduled with a really wide recording window and you deliver, or maybe even a co-narrator delivers early, but they don't have engineering or post-production booked until the end of that window, And that's, it's all hard to navigate. But what you said, even about just like the anxiety of reaching out, like, yes, I'm sharing all the resonance about those, like all the financial pieces that you're navigating. I have a money market account that has a high interest rate that I take 30% out of every project and put it there and leave it there until tax season. And then if I got a little cheddar left over, like, we'll hit the mall. But it's a delicate process. And I fumbled that process for myself when I took a trip to Brazil. I tried to set myself up to have a few weeks of no recording beforehand, so no one would want pickups from me when I was traveling for 2 weeks. And that window that I set up for myself was clearly too wide because I felt the lack of income moving in the weeks following and had to draw from my money marketing account and owe myself money, which is a convenient situation to be in. It's a form of fortune, absolutely. But it's also delaying a problem if I need to pay more in taxes at the end of the year. But emotionally, last year I did like 7 books for a company within the span of 2 months. And a long time went by and I really needed any money. And those books in particular hadn't paid me. And I went in, learned about what the window was for that company. We were past the window. And I felt like emailing. I didn't have a contact to email at the company to be like, hey, no one's paid me yet. I felt like emailing SAG-AFTRA to say like, hey, they haven't paid me. Could you please help? It felt like a violation of trust. Like it felt like a betrayal of some kind to ask for this money that was like legally overdue. And thankfully it was straightforward. It was straightforward. They were really helpful. It seems like when the SAG-AFTRA call comes in, like people are like, okay, let's shuffle, ballroom time. And that money gets there by the end of the week. But it was so hard to like get to that point. And I had to reinforce it for myself that sometimes that is just the step that you have to take. When a different company didn't pay me, they were several weeks late on the payment. I emailed that week saying, hey, wanted to check in on the payment. I have an email tracker and I do not look at whether people have opened my emails. Never when I'm doing producer reach outs, etc. I don't care about like whether you're reading my emails then. When I email you because you're months late on a payment and I see you open the email 1 week and you didn't respond, and then I send an email the next week and I see you open it and you didn't respond, and then I send the email a third week and you open it and you didn't respond, and then I email SAG-AFTRA and you're like, hey, André, oh my God, can we just get you to sign this form that I'd already signed? Yeah, absolutely. I'll sign it. Let's just get the
God, the fucking form that needs to be signed. God damn it.
But it's hard. It's an emotional, threshold.
Well, and I think that's what's so important in the mindset shift, that we are a business.
Yeah.
So yes, we are an artist, and yes, we are producing a creative endeavor, and we are putting our heart and our soul in our work. We are also our own executive assistant. And for me, this past year, having set up the business account and the personal account, and everything goes to something about that very simple thing, which doesn't cost a lot of money. I mean, there are so many great, I'm not going to remember the name of this one banking company, but you don't have to have a minimum balance. You can open a business bank account. You don't have to have an LLC. You don't have to have a DBA. You can open the bank account with $0, and you can say, this is my business bank account. And having that, changing your mindset that you are a business, and you are a barber, you are a plumber, you are laying foundation for a house. Your job is complete. The money is due. And it doesn't have to be this, once you can change your mindset, because, I've definitely, me. I've done that. I've absolutely been there. But now I'm like, nah, my little ding came off and it's 30 days and I have not been paid for my job.
Yeah.
And it's a job. And once you can make that mindset and treat it like a business, I mean, it really is a left brain, right brain sort of a situation. Once you can embrace that, I personally have found it much easier to just follow up and say, hey, if I'm directing, I certainly have to chase my own invoices and just go, hey, have the pickups been done for this? Might you have the total running time yet? Thanks so much. I'll invoice that. It's short, sweet, direct, to the point, but it's 100% business.
Absolutely.
And if I send a message to support at whatever paymaster because I haven't been paid and they don't get back to me that day, then I go to the union and I'm like, hey, it's 37 days. They haven't received my email. Can you please can you please shoot them a note?
Yeah.
But, for me, getting paid, that's business. You no longer mess with my money.
Yeah.
Because, nah.
Yeah.
Your barber's not gonna.
No, they're not. No. And I think, like, for me, the weird little intricate triangle that tacks onto what you're saying, Kimberly, too, is like recognizing that personally, I know in the time I've been narrating, I think there's been one situation with a small, very, very small producer, like actively not paying people, and like a real problem with that. Personally, I don't think anyone who has ever, big company or small, who has ever paid me late did so with malice. Right? Absolutely not. I've worked
For
office
the podcast
jobs.
audience,
I know
we all nodded our head.
all nodding. It was choreographed, in fact. And additionally, it's exactly like you said. That malice, that lack of malice, also impacts us, right? It still is an outcome that impacts us. And so we have to be willing to take the avenues that are available to us, at least, whether that's reaching out to the producer, contacting the finance person there, getting help from SAG-AFTRA if communication is falling apart. We have to be willing to take that step.
Yeah, money is so emotional.
Yeah.
And we all know it shouldn't be, but I think we all know that it is. And I don't think that's all because we're like artists or whatever. I think it's because like money is so deeply personal that it can feel personal when you're reaching out to ask about it. Even when Kimberly's right, we are businesses in addition to artists and all the many other things that we are as multi-hyphenates. I've had so many thoughts as you guys are talking. First of all, I also use Wave, and I also create an invoice for every single project, whether they require one or not. It is how I keep track of, and it's how I create the reports at the end of the year that I give to my accountant. And I am surprised by sometimes I get like people it seems strange to them that I'm asking for like, hey, when did the project finish? And like, what was the final runtime? Like, well, why do you need to know? And I was like, well, because in my because I have a system where I'm keeping track of this. Or like reaching out sometimes and being like, hey, so like, it's been 30 days since I created the invoice. And they're like, why did you create an invoice? There's no need for it. And I was like, well, because how else do I know how long this is taking? I was like, so if on your end, the 30 days hasn't started yet, could you please let me know and also justify why?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because according to my records, this date is when I turned in those pickups. So like, shouldn't that be when the clock started? No. Why not? So it allows you to ask questions. But also it creates in that, I don't know if you have the app on your phone, Kimberly, but sometimes you open up that app and it is like the least fun video game ever to see how high that number has gotten of like unpaid invoices.
I'm Gen X and I like a desktop. I don't like to do business on my phone, but
I look at that number and I'm like, ooh, it's never been that high before. Wait, that sucks. This is so much money that's owed to me that I don't have. Oh,
well, it is. And when you have that, like I have a spreadsheet of, you know, how much I've earned, what's outstanding, what came in, and how much is coming in the future. So I have in my personal, like keep track of money spreadsheet, I have 4 different columns so that I can see at a glance, you know, what is outstanding, what's coming. If I know that, you know, my monthly financial goal is X and I'm still $1,000 short, I better go scrounge up some money. I better go scrounge up a job to try to fill, you know, to try to hit that goal. And full disclosure, I have only hit my financial goal this year 4 months out of, what are we now, 11. So I'm still working in a deficit, but last year I only hit it twice. And the year before I never hit it. So like everything is just a little bit better every year. And like, those are actually the numbers I care about. Like maybe next year, 6 months out of the year, I'll hit my monthly financial goal.
Exactly.
You know, and it's a constant upkeep. And would that we, you know, get to a point where we have somebody who can do that for us. I mean, that would be the most incredible thing in the world to have somebody else do that. You know how much mental offloading I could do if I could just be like, here.
It's not perfectly what you're describing, but I do want to shamelessly plug a website that I use for this called voiceoverview.com, which I die by this website. It's made by voice actors for voice actors. And every job I get, I put it in and it does all kinds of tracking. It tells me how many things are at the booked, delivered, invoiced, and stage and paid stage for every month of the year. It takes the delivered and invoiced projects and gives you the sum of outstanding accounts. So I can see that number in one view. And this is just on the like front widgets page. Because it's also kind of a CRM and tracking clients, I'm saying when I put in a project, like, you know, this producer booked me from this company, it tells me what my top 10 clients are. It tells me, it gives me like revenue trends over the course of each month. I can go in and look and see, like, you know, if you're working broadly across voiceover, you can see the different genres or sources. I can tell what comes from Ahab, what comes from like a audition, what comes from whatever. It's just expansive, and all you do is plug in the work that you're doing, and it just gives you a ton of data. And every year, come tax season, I just export the PDF. If there's stuff in there that the widgets aren't giving me, I'm doing, you know, the little putting my codes into the PDF, to the Excel sheet. And it's, they have anyone can just try it for a month for free. And I think it's $12 a month after that. And it's it's the best $12 I spend every month, because yes, Kirt, similarly to you opening the Wave app, I open this and look at outstanding amounts. I look at this and, when I see like, oh, there's a project that I delivered from July that is sitting there. What is that? I can click it and it tells me what those things are and what I need to check in on. So that's my like.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. Listen, I am so impressed by all of your various tech innovations. And even, I know Wave is not that. I know everybody has Wave, except for me. I have an Excel spreadsheet, and I have not even Word documents because I'm on a Mac and I haven't bought Office Suite. Whatever. Pages. I have a Pages template that gives my invoices.
Like, seriously, whatever works. I mean, it doesn't... I switched my accountant this year, and I have an accounting spreadsheet that has many different sheets that are all linked and blah, blah, blah. And my accountant is like, it does not matter. Like, as long as there is a way that I can find it, like, as long as you're keeping track of it. So if you have, and I just 2 months ago finally was like, all right, QuickBooks, because I spend a lot of time bookkeeping and budgeting, and I have my money story is very complicated, and it is very emotional, and the only way that I can change that story is by being so incredibly detailed and on top of my money situation. But I then learned that I was spending so much time with my own thing that I was like, you know what? Similar to your voice overview, QuickBooks, great. I can set up my chart of accounts at the end of the month, just go bing, 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 as opposed to typing it and adding it and whatever. So yeah, whatever system works for you, again, if you're remembering that you're a business first, that's going to help you keep your money in track. Now, it's not going to, help when you've delivered your book that has a certain running time and you get a different running time back because different parties have had
the spacing.
Yeah. So that's I don't know if that's part of this conversation, but it
should be. Yeah.
I mean, if we want to talk about that,
it's part of my frustration with PFH versus words, paper words. It's like someone posted in one of the Facebook groups a joke, a total joke, being like, they got an indie project with a really good PFH rate. And so the meme that they included essentially said like, cool, now I'm going to narrate this book as like slowly as possible to like really juice up the PFH rate, right? Which to me reflects different kinds of work throughout the process. I understand how per finished hour pay makes sense at the editing stage. It makes sense at different places. But if the difference between me speaking this fast and the difference between me speaking this fast is a phone bill, you know what I mean? That doesn't add up to me. And again, it changes where in the process we can predict the expense, which to me seems significant for something like, on the company's end, being able to be more specific about what the expense is going to be early on.
Yeah. The only thing I can think of as far as per finished hour versus per word is I know I have done projects where a specific accent has been requested for the entire book. That both means more work for me to do it and also requires a slower pace so the listener can understand.
Sure.
And in those cases, and I keep track of project by project, like how many words per hour I actually finish. And I keep track of how many I do in a day. And I can see on those books with an accent through the whole book, I narrate slower. And I feel good about the fact that I'm getting paid a little bit more on the back end because it's a longer book, because I'm putting in more work. So, if it is per word, like to me, there's like is there a difficulty level adjustment that we can do? Or does like every project just need to be at the highest difficulty level and then we're reaping the benefits when it's not?
But my push is also that would be a rate conversation anyways, even if you were doing PFH, right?
Yep.
Like fast turnaround.
But it would have to be a part of the conversation.
Yes, absolutely. But fast turnaround, you're doing like an accent that you need to like do training for, whatever it is. Like there absolutely are circumstances where you should be asking for not should be, but you know what I mean? It makes sense.
You could be asking.
You could be asking for more money.
For a prep fee, or the only thing that I have been able to negotiate for trickier books, because I do a lot of accent work, is I expand my delivery window, because I know that depending on the complexity, I mean, if it's one accent through the book, that's at one pace. If I'm juggling the entire UK in a book, that is a very different pace. And so I'm going to know that I can only do maybe one finished hour a day.
Yeah. So, I mean, the only thing as we kind of circle around all of these topics and potential solutions and ways to advocate for ourselves, I guess the thing that I just keep coming back to as I'm listening to you guys is just the sheer amount of emotional and mental energy that goes into thinking about how we get paid. And that there are some lovely perks to being an independent contractor. And I think people may, outside of our industry, think that there's a glamour or like an ease to the fact that we can make our own schedule. But when every time you think about taking some days off, you have to weigh that against the fact that you're not going to get paid for that time. And can I afford to get paid for that time? Right. Like what I'm looking at, as I've shared, that like I've had some indie authors cancel their projects on me. And I'm looking at the rest of my year and going like, well, do I even try to fill that time? Do I try to move projects forward? Because it's the holidays. Am I willing to trade the time off that I was so looking forward to at the end of the year, the time with family and friends? Am I willing to trade that to hit the number that I said I needed to hit?
Yeah.
What is that trade-off? And so it is a difficult part of what we do, to be balancing all of these different considerations, balancing all the different ways, the different rates, the different pay scales, the different terms, all of the things that we have to look at. It takes a lot of emotional and mental energy. And for those who are listening, who may feel like, God, I never knew other people were struggling with this, I don't know someone who isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Even the most busy and booked, or what is it? The most booked and busy are still, it is constantly a hustle and a scramble, and you are chasing invoices. Yeah. Just constantly chasing invoices.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And there are ways to like make it a little easier. There are ways to systematize some of that, but there's also so much that's out of our control. And I mean, I think we've talked about some really, I mean, would that we ruled the world and, could put our great solutions into practice, looking at how we are paid, looking at, what rate negotiations could include or should include. And I think the audiobooks have now become an integral part, or integral. I can never remember which is the proper way to pronounce that word, but it's, it is a critical part of a book's publishing profile.
Right.
Audiobooks are no longer reserved for the most special books. They are, I mean, as we are constantly reminded, it is double-digit growth every year. We have exceeded $1 billion. I mean, we are constantly inundated with how much money audiobooks are bringing in, how many listeners there are, how just important audiobooks are to a book's success, to an author's success. And as we're hitting that inflection point where it's critical, I feel like we are at a point now where we have a pretty strong argument that things are now, it's maybe time to change and get things more centralized and formalized and standardized.
But it is interesting just to think about the fact that our work requires so much emotional investment and in the art, and how much better it is for all of us if we could alleviate some of these concerns.
Yeah.
The fact that we take up as much mental and emotional energy as we do thinking about getting paid, and how great it would be for the art if we could think about it a little less. And so whether that means we're advocating for ourselves, or we are advocating through a union, or we can just make our friends at the publishing houses and production houses and our friends who are indie authors just understand a little bit better how their approach to paying us affects the finished product, I think we have a better chance of maybe coming out the other end of these kinds of conversations, having alleviated a bit of that stress and that worry. And that's my hope.
Absolutely.
Like, when we do one of these episodes where it seems like we're just bitching about things, there is a point. There is a point at the end. It's good just to bitch sometimes, but also, like, if we can just make people aware that, like, hey, did you know how much this is stressing all of us out?
Yeah. Well, and to have some, solutions or hope for the future. I mean, I think we've said a lot of things here that are actionable, just personally actionable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I'll play Lindsey's role since she left, because she often likes to remind us that, like, as much as we can address problems as individuals, if they're systemic problems, we need to address them as a system. And I think there's some systemic issues here that we could all work together to make a little bit better. So,
hallelujah.
Agreed.
Hallelujah. So with that, thank you so much, Kimberly, for joining us and for having this conversation. I so appreciate your insight.
This is one of my favorite things to talk about. I could talk all day about money and possible ways to make our own lives easier and better. So thanks for having me. I'm so happy you picked me for this topic.
Oh, it's been our pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for listening out in podcast and YouTube land. We so appreciate you joining us at the Narrator Roundtable. If you want to join the conversation, you can find us on social media, or you can visit our website, narratorroundtable.com, to submit a question or a topic of discussion for a future episode. What's on your mind? We want to talk about it. Or maybe I should say bitch about it.
We want to kvetch about it.
Yes. Come on. The Narrator Roundtable is produced and hosted by André Santana, Deanna Anthony, Gail Shalan, Kirt Graves, and Lindsey Dorcus. All copyrighted material is shared with permission. Music and sound effects are licensed through Storyblocks Audio. All opinions shared are those of the individuals and do not reflect the positions or policies of any company or organization with which they happen to be associated.